Let us learn about history of novel, a new form of literature which was closely connected to the making of modern ways of thinking. The novel is a modern form of literature born from print, a mechanical invention, had huge circulation, and were widely read. In ancient times, manuscripts were handwritten and circulated among very few people. Novels became a common interest among the varied readers. As readers could identify with the lives of fictitious characters, they thought about issues such as the relationship between love and marriage, the proper conduct for men and women, and so on. The novel first took firm root in England and France. Aristocrats and gentlemen and lower middle class people formed the new readership for novels. With growing readership, market for books expanded and earnings of authors increased. This freed them from financial dependence on the patronage of aristocrats and gave them independence to experiment with different literary styles. The publishing market. Initially, publishing market excluded the poor as novels were expensive. Introduction of circulating libraries made access to books easier. Technological improvements in printing brought down the price of books, and innovations in marketing led to expanded sales. In France, publishers made super profits by hiring out novels by the hour. Reasons for popularity of novels. The worlds created by novels transported the readers to another person's world. Novels gave individuals the pleasure of reading in private as well as the joy of publicly reading or discussing stories. In rural areas, people would collect to hear one of them reading a novel aloud, often becoming deeply involved in the lives of the characters. In 1836, Pickwick Papers, a novel by Charles Dickens, was first serialized novel. They were illustrated and cheap. Serialization allowed readers to relish the suspense, discuss the characters of a novel, and live for weeks with their stories. The world of the novel. Novels were about ordinary people. In the 19th century, Europe entered the industrial age. Novelists such as Charles Dickens wrote about the terrible effects of industrialization on people's lives and characters. Dickens criticized the greed for profits and the ideas that reduced human beings into simple instruments of production. Community and society. The vast majority of readers of the novel lived in the city. The novel created in them a feeling of connection with the fate of rural communities. The 19th century British novelist Thomas Hardy wrote about old rural culture with dying out of its independent farmers. Like the nation, the novel brings together many cultures. The New Woman, a prosperous 18th century, saw women get more leisure, so they read and wrote novels. And novels had emotions and identities, experiences and problems of women. Many novels were about domestic life. They drew upon their experience, wrote about family life, and earned public recognition. Novels for the young. Novels for young boys idealized a new type of man, someone who was powerful, assertive, independent, and daring. Most of these novels were full of adventure, set in places remote from Europe. Love stories written for adolescent girls also first became popular in this period. Colonialism and after. When the novel originated, Europe was colonizing the rest of the world. The early novel contributed to colonialism by making the readers feel they belonged to a superior community and colonized people were primitive and barbaric. Colonial rule would civilize them. Later, in the 20th century, some writers wrote novels that showed the darker side of colonial occupation. The novel comes to India. The colonized, however, believed that the novel allowed them to explore their own identities and problems, their own national concerns. Let us see how the novel became popular in India and what significance it had for society. Many stories in prose were written as early as in 7th century in Sanskrit. Dastan were tradition of prose tales of adventure and heroism in Persian and Urdu. The modern novel form developed in India in the 19th century as Indians became familiar with the Western novel. This got an impetus due to development of the vernacular print. Reading public. Earliest Indian novels were written in Bengali and Marathi. Most novels were not realistic and presented an imagery narrative with a moral purpose. Novelists of the 19th century developed modern literature that produced a sense of national belonging and cultural equality with their colonial masters. The novel in South India. Novels began appearing in South Indian languages during colonial rule. Many novels were translations of English novels. Soon, the authors realized that local readers could not connect with characters in English novels and found direct translations of an English novel dreadfully boring. So they started writing in local language. The novel in Hindi. Bharatendu Harishchandra was the pioneer of modern Hindi literature. He encouraged many writers to recreate and translate novels from other languages. Many novels were actually translated and adapted from English and Bengali under his influence. First proper modern novel, Pariksha Guru, was written by Srinivas Das of Delhi in 1882. It reflects the inner and outer world of the newly emerging middle classes caught in the difficulty of adapting to colonized society and at the same time preserving their own cultural identity. The writings of Devkinandan Khatri created a novel reading public in Hindi. His bestseller, Chandrakanta, a romance with dazzling elements of fantasy. The novel gives insights into the fears and desires of its reading public. Munshi Premchand achieved excellence in the Hindi novel writing. He drew on the traditional art of Kissa-goi storytelling. His novels were a reflection on the lives of ordinary people and social issues like poor condition of women in society, child marriage, and dowry. Novels in Bengal. In the 19th century, the early Bengali novels were either located in the past, on historical events, or depicted the inner world of domestic life in contemporary settings, dealing with the social problems and romantic relationships between men and women. Novels were read individually by the Bhadralok of Bengal. Initially, the Bengali novel used a colloquial style associated with urban life. It also used Maili, the language associated with women's speech. This style was quickly replaced by Bankim's prose, which was Sanskritized but also contained a more vernacular style. The power of telling stories in simple language made Sarat Chandra Chattopadhyay (1876 to 1938) the most popular novelist in Bengal and probably in the rest of India. The novel in different parts of India had many regional peculiarities, but there were also recurring patterns and common concerns. Uses of the novel. Colonial administrators found vernacular novels a valuable source of information on native life and customs, which was useful for them in governing Indian society. Indians used the novel as a powerful medium to criticize defects in their society and to suggest remedies. Some writers used the novel mainly to propagate their ideas about society among a wider readership. Novels helped in establishing a relationship with the past. These novels helped in creating a sense of national pride among their readers. Novels were read by people who shared a common language. This helped in creating a sense of collective belonging on the basis of one's language. Regional differences in language entered the novels and made the readers familiar with the ways in which people in other parts of the land spoke their language. The problem of being modern. Novels often were mostly about the real world. They also presented a vision of how things ought to be. Heroes and heroines had ideal qualities which the readers could admire and imitate. They also showed readers how Indian and foreign lifestyles could be brought together in an ideal combination. Pleasures of reading. As elsewhere in the world, in India too, the novel became a popular medium of entertainment among the middle class. The circulation of printed books allowed people to amuse themselves in new ways. The novel assisted in the spread of silent reading, which was uncommon then. Reading a novel was like daydreaming. Many people got worried about the effects of the novel on readers who were taken away from their real surroundings into an imaginary world where anything could happen. Some of them wrote in newspapers and magazines advising people to stay away from the immoral influence of novels. Women and children were often singled out for such advice. They were seen as easily corruptible. Older women, some of whom could not read, listened with fascinated attention to popular Tamil novels read out to them by their grandchildren, a nice reversal of the familiar grandma's tales. Women soon began to write novels. In some languages, the early creations of women were poems, essays, or autobiographical pieces. In the early decades of the 20th century, women in South India also began writing novels and short stories. Novels were popular among women as it allowed for a new conception of womanhood. Stories of love showed women who could choose or refuse their partners and relationships. It showed women who could to some extent control their lives. Rokeya Hossain, 1880 to 1932, a reformer and a widow, wrote a satiric fantasy in English called Sultana's Dream, 1905, which shows a topsy-turvy world in which women take the place of men. Many men were suspicious of women writing novels or reading them. Many women wrote in secret. In the 20th century, Sailabala Ghosh Jaya, a popular novelist, could only write because her husband protected her. In South, women and girls were often discouraged from reading novels. Some women authors also wrote about women who changed the world of both men and women. Rokeya Hossain, 1880 to 1932, was a reformer who, after she was widowed, started a girls' school in Calcutta. She wrote a satiric fantasy in English called Sultana's Dream, 1905, which shows a topsy-turvy world in which women take the place of men. Her novel, Padmarag, also showed the need for women to reform their condition by their own actions. caste practices, lower castes and minorities. Intercaste marriage of characters in novels became an issue that was hotly debated. Most novels were written by members of the upper castes and were primarily about upper caste characters. Pothere Kunjambu, a lower caste writer from North Kerala, wrote about caste oppression and the importance of education for the upliftment of the lower castes. From the 1920s, in Bengal too, a new kind of novel emerged that depicted the lives of peasants and low castes. Advaita Malla Burman's Titash Ek De Nadir Naam, 1956, describes the community life of the Mallas, festivals, boat races, bhatyali songs, their relationships of friendship and animosity with the peasants and the oppression of the upper castes. Communities that had not received much space in the literary scene earlier also found space in novels. Waiko Muhammad Bashir, 1908 to 96, was a Muslim writer and a renowned novelist in Malayalam. His novels spoke about details from the everyday life of Muslim households and very unusual themes at that time: poverty, insanity, and life in prisons. Dissatisfied by colonial history and traditional Puranic stories of the past, new authors wrote historical novels which imagined the nation to be full of adventure, heroism, sacrifice, qualities that could not be found in the offices and streets of the 19th century world. Bhudeb Mukhopadhyay's 1827 to 1994 Anguriya Binimoy, 1857, was the first historical novel based on Shivaji was written in Bengal. Bankim's Anand Math, 1882, is a novel about a secret Hindu militia that fights Muslims to establish a Hindu kingdom. The novel and nation-making. Imagining a heroic past was one way in which the novel helped in popularizing the sense of belonging to a common nation. Various classes were included in the novel so that they could be seen to belong to a shared world. Premchand's characters belonged to different social strata and created a community based on democratic values and dignity.